Where do you begin with a series that's about to hit their 9th main game, has multiple spin-off games spanning just about every system, and then has CG and live-action films in addition to all of this? Well, let's clear all that up and quickly, mind you, so you can be on your way to starting your first Resident Evil adventure into the funhouse of horrors. To be blunt, your first instinct was probably correct. Starting with the lowest number not named 0, Resident Evil 1 was originally the first game in the series where everything began until years later when Capcom threw in a prequel. The first twist to this answer is that the best version of this is the one titled Resident Evil, known also as Resident Evil Remake, or RE1R for short. Also, part of the HD Remaster collection available on pretty much every game storefront or retailer imaginable. Alternatively, if that version is too scary, you can revert to the original PS1 version of it, which has happened to be very recently revitalized for PC on Good Old Games website, also more commonly known as GOG. Purchase the game over there, or you can likely find the ported PS1 version on console storefronts as well. Those versions may be titled Resident Evil Director's Cut, which is the enhanced version of the original. So why skip Resident Evil 0? You may have noticed already that there is also a game in the series titled Resident Evil 0. 0 comes before 1, so why are we starting here? Few reasons. First, Resident Evil 0 didn't release until 5 years after Resident Evil 1, which is after sequels of Resident Evil 2, 3, and Code Veronica before it even arrived. Resident Evil 0 is a prequel, but it's also not mandatory to play to understand the series. It's a deeper dive into the lore of the series, but far from required viewing to understand it. You're also getting 2 of the biggest main characters in the entire series with Jill and Chris, whereas that's not the case with Resident Evil 0's cast. The last reason is that if I had you play that game first, your first impression on the series might be kind of lackluster. The control scheme and system that game exclusively uses is a paired partner system involving 2 characters. One side character from Resident Evil 1 and a newcomer. This paired system is widely known to be frustrating to swap between characters, doesn't always serve a useful purpose, and added to that is the inventory system that seems good at first, allowing you to place items wherever you want to, but for a new player, it can be devastating to place a key item in a poorly placed location and have to travel a far distance back to get it. While Resident Evil 1 has a magical wormhole inventory box that transfers equipment to all boxes within the game without needing to backtrack. Very handy. Basically, Resident Evil 0 isn't the most new player-friendly game for the series. We've cleared where to start, and the optional prequel I don't actually recommend to begin with. If you enjoyed Resident Evil 1 Remake, by all means feel free to jump into 0 afterwards. But if asking for my advice, which it kind of seems like you are, I'd just leave it be for a while and head right into Resident Evil 2, the sequel that takes place a couple months after the events of Resident Evil 1 in the nearby setting of Raccoon City. What if I don't actually like the controls of this game? Is it okay to start with a different one? Yes, and sorta no. It would be technically fine to play any game in the series first. Cop-out answer. Besides Resident Evil 8, also known as Village. Perhaps. Knowing that every Resident Evil is fundamentally a biohazard event that spreads, and soldiers or civilians must fight their way through to survive. That's a rough, extremely primitive translation of each game. The main issue would be not knowing characters, as various ones tend to return if they survive. The background on the evil corporations may be confusing for what's happening, or happen to them, depending on the game as well. The next best option would be to begin with Resident Evil 2 Remake. It uses modern controls that shouldn't feel cumbersome. You would have only missed the first game, which none of those characters are present anyways, but all new ones. The story is self-contained and is largely not dependent on what occurred prior to it, and it also explains the events well enough to grasp what is happening and some things that actually did happen prior in the first game. Another option is to begin with Resident Evil 7, as it is a fresh beginning with new characters and a blank slate of story, making it pretty easy for newcomers to come in and understand. There are very fine minute details you won't, but none that impact the experience. Resident Evil 8 is the direct sequel to this specific game, not just the series, making it pretty difficult to start the series with that one specifically. What about the CG films or live action? The live action films aren't connected and really aren't faithful to the games. Let's leave it at that. Now, the CG films, I'll admit for a long time even I thought they weren't canon or connected to the series. Maybe because I didn't want them to be, as they seem to muddle and cram the story to unbelievable levels. New Outbreak of the Month territory at this point. They do connect, but you do not need to watch any of them to understand and enjoy the game series. They can provide interesting side stories and are stuffed between various games in the series, but are not essential unless you want more Resident Evil content and an expanded lore in the series. Hopefully this guide provided you with the answers you were looking for. Just to recap, I recommended Resident Evil 1 Remake to begin with, but if the old controls in that game aren't for you, head for its sequel in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And if that's still not what you're after, perhaps the first-person controls in Resident Evil 7 would do the trick. Those three games all have different gameplay. Hopefully, one of those fits your style. Enjoy the frights and welcome Rookie to the series. Best of luck surviving each nightmare. As always, thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time for more Resident Evil content on Hittobox.